when I was studying organic chemistry, and I learned that Adderall is one methyl group away from crystal meth. Wow, this is like a legalized, more controlled form of crystal meth that they're prescribing to our nation.
You can knock yourself into permanent psychosis. You could become schizophrenic.
I've had friends who were chronic crystal meth users that they became schizophrenic.
You know, it's an amphetamine, so a lot of people abuse it. I mean, I took it in college for fun, you know, it's like, so bad. It's so bad.
All right, well, welcome everybody. Another episode, Body Never Lies. Today, my guest is Erica Spiegelman. She is a co-founder of New Spirit Recovery. She's an author, counselor, speaker, educator. Very excited to have her on today. Erica, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy we made this work. Finally, I've been trying to connect with you.
It was, here we are. Thank you so much for making time. I know you're super busy. You're also a mom.
Pleasure. Yeah.
How many kids do you have?
Two kids. I have a 4 and a 5-year-old. They're 1 year apart. So it was like a back-to-back situation. Oh, yeah. It's great. But you know, obviously identity wise, your life shifts so much when you have children, and especially trying to figure out the balance with work now. And, you know, just, I think not only physical time, but your emotional energy and your mental capacity, how to keep yourself aligned with the spiritual self-care that I had in place, my, routines for so long. And then you have kids and that kind of throws it off and you don't have as much time for yourself. So it's been an interesting couple of years.
Do you think it's harder that they're at the age they are? You said they're 4 and 5 years old.
No, I think it's easier now for sure. You know, they're not as reliant and you don't need to, it's like, but still I feel like there's like my nervous system is very attuned to obviously how they feel, but also like if they call me, I turn around, right? It's just everything is kind of shifted. So it's been really interesting. I feel like I haven't had time to really process any of it, to be honest, because it's just gone. But it's nice to talk about,
Yeah, I'm curious. I want to talk to you more about that in a second. But I got introduced to you through Shane at Fentanyl Solution. What is your involvement with Fentanyl Solution?
So Fentanyl Solutions, we sponsored an event of theirs and just became friendly with them because me and my 2 business partners own a detox residential treatment center called New Spirit Recovery, and we're in Encino in LA. And we, really want to help end this fentanyl crisis and obviously save lives and from all addictions, alcohol, drugs, whatever it is that's causing negative consequences in someone's life. So we wanted to support them and figure out ways in which we could collaborate with local, they're a nonprofit, but for-profit, nonprofit, anybody that's out there that's doing what we're doing and trying to help lift the stigma of addiction, but really help people recover. And I think a unique way in which what we're doing, and it's all based around kind of like my books and the work that I've done about rewiring and kind of helping clients with tools so that they can feed their emotional world, physical world, spiritual world. We're trying to get them on routines because really like repetition. That's how we change the brain through those pathways. And so different places I worked at through the years, I've worked in treatment for over 15 years, as a counselor, and I've seen like just this one cookie cutter kind of situation. And now we're trying to bring more to the table. And I feel like they are too. So
how did you get started?
I got sober myself at 28 years old. I just turned 28 at the time. So it's been 16 years. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then felt a really strong calling when I was in treatment to become a counselor. Like it was like just came to me. But I had been a writer. I was a literature major in my undergraduate education. And so it's funny how 2 worlds kind of come together. Your path is, I think, very much meant to be in a way. So I had went back to school and became a counselor at UCLA, and then have been working ever since in the field, and that's got inspiration to write my book, and that's how all that started.
How did you get into treatment? Were you, an addict for many years? Was it short-lived? What was your experience around that?
I started doing drugs, pot, and drinking at like 12, 13 years old, beer. I was very much mature for my age and had peers, friends that were also a little bit more independent, like parents weren't around, that kind of stuff. So I was just someone that, like, I think when I was younger, my parents divorced when I was 7, and I was kind of taught to put on a mask and smile and pretend like everything was okay. And I know I suppressed, looking back now and doing all this work on myself, but suppressed any negative emotion. And I was kind of told, like, what's wrong? It's my, I'll buy you something, have an ice cream, have a toy, whatever it was. And so I think when I finally found alcohol at 12, 13, drugs, kind of that scene, I felt like, oh, wow, I could feel, I could, all the emotion was there, and it was like very attractive to me. And I just liked acting out. I grew up in San Francisco. So I was like going up to Haight Street and going to raves. And, we were near a city. It was just 90s in that town, and it was fun, But even at that point, as like more drugs came into the scene, I like realized, oh, I like this more than I probably should, or I look forward to it, or it became more habitual faster at that age, which I was aware of. Like, I was always an aware person, very intuitive, like you're saying, about my own self and the world. And, I progressed through college, and just the drinking was every day, Monday through Sunday. And it was normalized because I went to University of Arizona. It was a big party school, and I found friends that did drink, and so it progressed, but even then I knew it was an issue. And even after I moved to New York, and that it was nonstop. And anyway, it just became like a shell of who I really was, depressed, shaking. Earlier, I started drinking earlier and earlier. My parents noticed. My mom was always like, hounding me, and you need help. Eventually I succumbed to it. So that's how that happened. But there was a very low internal bottom. Like I say to my clients now, like, you can have external bottoms, internal bottoms. Luckily, like, I didn't get a DUI, or my life wasn't destroyed by any means, but it was the darkest, deepest hole I've ever been in. And it was impossible. It felt impossible to get out of, really. It truly did. And I was living in San Francisco at the time and praying. Like, I remember I said to myself once, like, God, help me get out of this cycle. It just felt so uncontrollable. And so my mom said, you need treatment. And I said, no. And that went on for a while. And then finally I said yes after a very tough week. So that was it. And I never looked back. I stayed sober ever since.
Wow. So one time was it for you?
I was ready. Like, I was so sick and tired. Like I was telling you, I would like pray, like, how do I stop this? I tried to stop by myself, couldn't, like the brain that is functioning for you at that time will not get you out of it. You have to like literally be pulled out of your environment.
Yeah. So you checked in to a center.
Yeah.
And did you feel, I don't want to say at home, but did you feel accepted? Did you feel like, oh, wow, this is what I needed this whole time?
Yeah. I mean, I immediately was like, oh, wow. Like I loved health, and I loved to learn about, I was very like connected to a lot of things when I was younger, and had hobbies, and moved my body and exercised and did sports. So like being there and having the routine, and it really, I felt great. I was very proud of myself, and I just kept on with it. And I kind of created my own. So like where the idea for the book came, I created my own treatment plan for myself. I was like up at 7, changed how I ate, created boundaries with people in my life. Communication, I was very more assertive and able to be transparent. It took time, right? But again, sleeping, I was very like routined with, I started running, and I was running every, 5 days a week, not a lot, 35, 40 minutes a day, but it was like every day. And I became like a healthy woman, like it took a little while, but I really felt my identity switch, and I was so proud of myself. And I really worked on that, like positive self-talk and self-compassion, and reading a lot of books on Buddhism. And Thich Nhat Hanh was, love, one of my favorite mentors, writers. And I just started like eating information up, like just listening to podcasts, whatever was out there. I just became like obsessed with health,
Probably more YouTube videos at that time.
Yeah, exactly. There really wasn't that many podcasts. You're right. Yeah.
So how long were you in treatment for? while you're developing these habits?
Those habits didn't start in treatment. I mean, yes, a little bit, like they took us to a gym and, we got up early and those kind of things. But I think the minute I went to treatment, and I went to a sober living for 30 days, and then I moved to LA right after that. And I think the minute I hit the ground in LA, away from any other outside help, I was like on it myself.
Wow. That's not very common in treatment, right? For an average person to be that consistent and kind of ride that momentum that strongly.
No, it's not that common. I felt this like very, I can't explain it, but I felt like a force. It was like, it was like, I mean, I have a great family. I have a lot of love and support in my life, which I'm grateful for. I think that was helpful. But also, I knew I had a higher purpose always, even when I was a young girl. Like I knew about life, and I knew about death when I was like 5 or 6. And having a 5-year-old, it's interesting because I like knew I wasn't going to be there one day, and the people I loved, no one taught me this, but it was like very innate. And so I feel like I had always known about purpose, and I felt, and I'm not saying this in a way that egotistical, but I felt like I had a higher purpose always. And I knew, I don't know, I just knew a lot of things when I was younger. And so I feel like when I was reborn, really, when I turned 28 and got sober, that's how I felt. I was like, I just felt like this is your time, and this is what that was all about, of like, this is going to be the path to your purpose in a way. And so I felt so excited for it. I wasn't scared of it, and I didn't want to go back.
Yeah, it sounds like you had a spiritual awakening, and in order for you to get there, you had to hit your rock bottom through addiction and treatment, and that sort of catapulted you into finding your purpose spiritually and finding out your calling.
Yes, for sure.
I have a similar story too, because I grew up in a dysfunctional family, dysfunctional home, broken family. And I told you I grew up around addiction, family members, enabling, in Asian culture. I also heard in Latin and other cultures, it's very similar, where the mother sort of enables the son or the daughter without realizing that they're enabling, because they're just thinking they're giving them love, but allowing them to stay trapped in their addiction. I grew up seeing that. I grew up, I had friends who were users, but I also have an addictive personality, and having all that pain growing up as a kid, when I was in middle school, high school, I turned to, cannabis and alcohol to numb myself. But at the same time, like you said, the partying and being out with friends, there was some excitement. There was an ability to feel that, all the feelings that I was forced to suppress as a child, all came up. And my path was different. I didn't become a full-on addict, but I fell into violence and gangs and stuff like that. So I got sent away to juvenile, not prison, juvenile hall when I was 16. Yeah. And then when I came out, I started to realize that this is not the life I wanted. And I barely made it to college, luckily. And the college I went to was in Boulder, Colorado, which is like a spiritual mecca. Yeah. And at that time, I was searching for my identity. Like, who am I? If I'm not this person that's meant to hurt people, who am I then? And I went on a very deep dive into consuming as many different spiritual teachers and traditions as I could. And it was 4 or 5 years of just intensely every single day. That's all I cared about. I was expanding not just knowledge, but intuition, because just like you, when I was a kid, I used to think about death. I remember like I was 8 years old at night. What happens when you die? Yeah. And I kind of could sense death. Like I could imagine what happens when you die. And it was the weirdest thing, because I was like, okay, I don't have a body. I don't have a mind, but there's something aware. There's something that's still aware. Yeah. And it was, I didn't know how to put that into context at that age. It wasn't until way later on that made so much sense to me. So, I think that's what drew me to you. When I was looking at yourself, I could just feel there was a lot more depth and a lot more wisdom about you than just traditional recovery. What I notice about recovery is there is a strong spiritual component. And I think the people who do succeed learn how to connect to that aspect, right? Whether it's AA or whatever it is for them, that's what allows them to continue to grow and stay sober.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and thank you so much for your kind words. And I loved hearing your story, because I feel like so many parallels. I'll talk about the juvenile and that a lot of my, well, I have a program in 305 jails and juvenile halls right now,
Wow.
detention centers. Yeah, my online program I gave to a company called Adovo. It's their nonprofit. I gave them it for free, and they gave me data back. But yeah, like 30,000 incarcerated learners have used the program, and it's really been amazing. I visited a juvenile detention center in LA recently, and it was very moving to see these young boys that were so and are so hopeful for their lives, and it was very powerful. But yeah, like you were saying, the spiritual like component. I mean, I think successful people have sustainable recovery. What is that spiritual component? But I truly think the foundation has to be self-love and like self-connection,
Hmm.
which you don't hear necessarily in AA. You hear about God and
Mm-hmm.
something else outside yourself, right?
Mm.
And it is very important, I think, to believe that there's an energy, there's something bigger, there's a plan, things are meant to be, whatever that reframing is. But again, I don't think anybody can really have long, sustainable sobriety unless that self love is there, because you have to choose yourself every day.
Mm.
Maybe choosing Jesus or God or whatever it is enough too. But I truly think that you are a piece of God. You are a piece of this miracle. You are a piece of this energy. So in essence, you are choosing yourself.
Right.
But it's so much more than just putting down a drink, right? Like this is what we're talking about. It's like, it's layers and layers and layers and layers more. And so I think having the right teachers on this path, or doing the work yourself, which, like you said, is not very common, but it's absolutely possible. I've seen I've had clients, I just had a client that passed the bar. She was an opiate addict from West Virginia, didn't really have that plan in her cards. And then it came up through counseling, and she just passed the
Mm.
bar 2 days ago. She just wrote me. So I've seen lives
Wow.
transform. Yeah.
Yeah. What made you co-found this recovery center? So you said you worked for 15 years as a counselor.
Mhm.
Did you feel like there's something missing that you wanted to bring, or did you feel, why
Yeah.
did you feel like you wanted to do this?
I created it, another journey for me during this period of time has been being an entrepreneur and having my own business and creating a brand around my books and workbooks and things. And for a while, I was like, how can I utilize this rewired program I have? Like, I created a program for recovery, and there's a free manual on my website. Anybody could go to my website and download it, and there's community meetings out there that I have nothing to do with. Other people run them, but they're rewired meetings online. They're Zooms. So it's an option other than AA if you want to community, and I felt like it would be great to bring that to a treatment center, and give people these tools like that I didn't see really being taught at other places I worked at. And I worked at some amazing places with great people, but yet still didn't teach these things as the foundational tools. So I wanted an opportunity to do that at New Spirit Recovery. So that's what we're doing. Like I always said to my clients, if I could I even said this to some clients at our center yesterday, if I could take you into a jungle in Costa Rica with no access to alcohol, drugs, just healthy foods, hiking every day, swimming in the ocean, if I could take you for a year and then we walk out of that jungle, you would be a different person, right? Like if I could hold you and keep you and kind of do what I did for myself, you would feel like a different human being and see yourself differently. And the expansion would be, you can't, indescribable really, right? But that's unfortunately something we can't necessarily do for people because they have lives and kids and jobs. And so if this is the best I can do to get as close to that as I can, then that's kind of why I wanted to try.
What would you say is different about your approach versus traditional approaches?
I think it's really about self-empowerment, and like I said, the foundation is mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual self-care. That's what I talk about. I've done a lot of corporate wellness speaking. I've done a lot of speaking at different recovery companies. I just was in Portland, Oregon 2 weeks ago. Like I always talk about self-care, and it's not just like, oh, take a bath, take a walk. It's like truly mental self-care. What does that mean? We have to understand cognitive distortions. We have to understand our narratives, where they came from. We all grew up in different cultures, different families, different countries, different we hear different things when we were little kids. We look up and we see these parents, and they gave us messaging, like all of this matters. And so that's what we talk about. That's what we uncover. And I think that's different.
Do you think some of the traditional methods need to be updated for modern times?
Yes. Yeah, I do. I think language is really important, and I think a lot of the times in 12-step programs, like the language is like, even to stand up and have to say, I'm an alcoholic when I'm 6 years sober, I'm 5 years sober, I'm 10 years, and I'm a healthy woman. Like, to me, it never resonated. I didn't like it. I never did it. I love the aspect of community. So I think I tell my clients to try it, see if it's good for you. I'm also a big believer of like, there's a different path for everybody in recovery. And I think everyone should try everything. I think you should learn about a Buddhist, trajectory for it. I think you should learn about like all these different things and then decide what you want to add to your own
plan. I love that. What are some of your habits then now? What are your routines? What are some of your, like, I got to do this all the time every day? Or
I'm really a stickler on sleep, like 8 hours. So I go to bed by like 9:30. I'm up at 6:30. I try and move. Like when I first changed my life, I was, I walked or ran. I still do probably like 4 to 5 times a week. Like try and get a walk in or move every day in the morning. I also have a gratitude practice in the morning. I'll admit it's been harder now having kids to do that. But when I was changing my life every single day, did not miss it. And it was after my run, right when I was done running and I was sweating and I was like, felt alive, felt strong, felt connected. And I would just drop into like what I was grateful for and how far I've come and all the, and it would move me to tears. And it still does. Like I could start crying like this, just how grateful I feel even to this day of just getting from the dark to the light. And, and that's to me, like, it's so, I don't know how, maybe it's because I did it so many times through the years that dropping into that gratitude that I don't even need to necessarily drop in. Like it just comes up the emotion because I'm very much aware of how blessed. And I know I was part of it to get those routines in place, but, I'm very grateful for it. Yeah.
And then how about community group meetings? They say that's like the most effective, right? Percentage wise. How important is that, you think?
I think for a lot of people need that, and accountability is super important, and it provides accountability, provides, a community for you to check in. You matter, like if you're missing one day, someone checks in on you. It's nice, and you can have people that have walked the path and you don't feel alone. And there's so many benefits to community for sure. I think because I got into the field right away, I had to walk the walk. I showed up at work every day and I was leading people right down this path. So I had to kind of keep it up myself. So I think that was helpful. I also had a community of therapists and as friends. And I have a really close family that I spent a lot of time with early in my sobriety, traveling with my mom everywhere. We had a lot of amazing experiences. So I didn't necessarily, for me, need that community like some people may, everyone's different, but I would definitely encourage people to try it. I mean, I tried meetings as well. I went to them and saw what it was about, and it just didn't fit in my lifestyle,
And nowadays there's virtual meetings, Zoom meetings. So it makes it a lot easier for people to have access.
Yes, totally. It's very cool. I think it's helpful. I think it feels like you know people, even if it's on Zoom,
And that's what I realized. My former partner, who I thought she was going to be my life partner, we ended up separating because she relapsed. But she was doing so good in her recovery. Yeah. But I think she got a little too confident. She got a little too comfortable. And during that time, I learned so much because I was attending meetings with her. I was supporting her. And what I realized was how important it is for the people around you to understand, not just understand that this person is an addict, because there's a lot of functioning addicts who can hide it really well. So a lot of family members are in denial, but not just that, but to also understand the psychology and the mechanism of addiction. Because how many family members think, if I just give them love and know that I love them, or if they really love me, they'll change. Yeah. Without really understanding the psychology of, doesn't always work that way.
Yeah, it's true. It is an illness, an active addiction. I always say this. I was telling clients this yesterday. It's like people have shame in their old behaviors, but you really are hijacked. Like you really are hijacked, like biologically, psychologically, emotionally. with this connection to this substance, it's a relationship, right? I mean, it literally is your primary relationship. And sometimes for 30 years, it's your primary relationship where you wake up and it is the first thing on your mind, not the person lying next to you, you know?
Wow.
So, and why is that? It's because we are physically addicted to it, you know, or even with pot, like a lot, they found more psychologically addicted to that, right? I can't function without it. I can't sleep without it. I can't get up without it. And then, you know, for me, just like I woke up shaking every day. Like my nervous system was damaged from it. You know, like it was calling for it. Like it was, as much as I wanted to stop, it wasn't self-will. It was more than that, you know? And so I think family members think like, well, if they love me or, you know, they have kids, they should, you know, it's like, it's so much more. And that's why, like, I'm a big believer in treatment and getting people out of their environment and getting them away from it. And like you said, when people get confident, it's, I think ultimately because they don't bury it. It's not dead to them. Like I buried it. Like it's gone. Like I tell my clients this, I know you may not be ready to hear this now. You're like 1 week in, but you need to say goodbye. It's dead, gone, buried. There is no door cracked open. There isn't like, oh, in a year, if I feel better, oh, in 10 years, I'll revisit this. No, you know, it's like non-negotiable. It's gone. Write a letter to it, grieve it, mourn it, bury it, because that is how you move on. You can't negotiate this relationship anymore. You know, you can't say, and if you do say, like, I don't know if she said this to herself, but like, if you have any inkling of like, maybe one day, that's going to be the end of it eventually.
Yeah. So she had multiple addictions and one substance was like her main, but she thought if she could get clean of the substance, she could still drink alcohol and not feel
No, well, no. Yeah.
You know,
sober is sober. Like, you know, if you really want to have true sobriety, right? You can't go from one thing to the other because the nature of our personalities will just start finding something else to use to distract, you know?
Yeah. And the worst part of all of this was that her mother really downplayed the whole situation. Because she was a functioning addict, her mother really didn't understand what an addict was. And so when she saw her doing better, she was providing the environment and the money for her to fall back.
Yeah.
Oh, and they also kind of had a codependent relationship. I'm sure you see that pretty often too.
Yeah.
Right.
Of course. Yeah.
How is that for you, seeing the family dynamic and seeing a possible family member sort of pulling them back in without realizing that's what they're doing?
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot, you know, like I always say, like the family needs an education just as much as the person that is the addict, because there's so many dances that we do in families and dynamics and enabling, and a lot of the times too, I feel like the family member may want their loved one to change, but yet when they do change, it's a threat to like the system in a way.
Yeah.
Right. Because they have other things going on. It's like, well, you were the distraction. Now that's not the distraction. Now, what are we looking at now? And what's, you know, there's so many, again, layers to that. You know, my dad is still a drinker and I had to have really good boundaries with him because I drank with him for many years. And I felt very scared to stop because I was afraid our relationship would change, which it did. But I was scared to the point where I almost didn't want to. It was my excuse not to, because how are we going to relate to each other? And it was very scary. And it could have been my downfall. It could have been, he would easily have been like, you don't have a problem, right? But again, he's very proud of me and our relationship is very good. But, you know, like I had to shift and have boundaries in many ways, you know, for myself. So I kind of learned about that and had the wherewithal to do that. But it's hard for people to do that if they don't know, they're not aware.
I have another question for you. What are your thoughts on Adderall? Do you ever have anyone coming in for Adderall treatment or? Yeah,
I mean, I have had clients from past places I've worked at that have come in for Adderall, and it's really a horrible drug. I think it's so dangerous. It's so bad for your brain. I've seen people come in and like psychosis, literally psychosis, hearing voices, hearing noises, chronic headaches, migraines. The abuse is, you know, it's an amphetamine. So a lot of people abuse it. I mean, I took it in college for fun, you know, it's like, you know, I had a client, she was taking, I don't know, 10 to 15 pills a day, you know, and she was literally hearing things. And, you know, I mean, and also I'm talking about abuse, but like, you know, when you abuse anything like that is a speedy drug, right? Like, you can knock yourself into permanent psychosis. You could become schizophrenic if you have mental health.
Oh,
Yeah, if you have mental health issues in your family of origin, let's say, and you know that there's been depression and bipolar and schizophrenia, suicide, and you start playing around with those drugs, your brain is very delicate. And I've seen people go into full psychosis and not come out. From marijuana also, by the way, it's one of the most common ones.
wow.
Yeah, my younger brother had a friend who was 16 and he was smoking a lot of pot, and his great grandfather was schizophrenic, and he was a normal kid until he started smoking, and it tipped him over, and he's been in a mental hospital ever since. Like, it's very sad, but pot does that. Especially pot that it could be laced. You never know what's in it with the mix of it. Adderall, I've seen that happen too. And just on Adderall in general too, of just I've seen younger kids on it. I think we should try to take as many measures as possible, other interventions, before you stick a fucking 8-year-old, excuse my language, on these medicines. My brother was put on them at 10 years old, and it created OCDs. He had a lot of problems, and it was very sad to watch, and it was very frustrating to watch. And parents, at the time, my mom didn't want him on, and my dad did, but it was new. It was new to the market. It was in the 90s. So, but yeah, we've seen a lot since. These kids that were on it in the 90s when it just came out are now adults. Yeah.
Yeah. I was diagnosed with ADHD as well, and they put me on Ritalin for a little bit. I hated the way it made me feel.
Yeah.
But, and luckily I never got, I never took it like that. But when I was studying chemistry, organic chemistry, and I learned that Adderall is one methyl group away from crystal meth.
Yeah.
It made sense to me. Like, wow, this is like a legalized, more controlled form of crystal meth that they're prescribing to our nation of young, teenagers, and what's going to be the long-term damage from that.
So bad. It's so bad. And I think if you're hyper, you can't sit still, then go do something else, and again, but I think back in the day, I don't know if it still goes on, but teachers would shame people like that, tell the parents there's something wrong with your child. And, it creates such like a disastrous reaction,
When people get into psychosis, like you said, is that permanent? There's no coming back from that.
No, you could have mild. I mean, everything's on a spectrum in life, right? Like, sexuality's on a spectrum, drug addiction's on a spectrum. And psychosis too. Like, mental health issues are on a spectrum. So, I've seen people hear noises like smoke pot and have it be laced, and then have, like, I would say, a slight psychosis after that, but then after time it gets better, especially if you stop using the drug. Yeah, most of the time it does stay. I mean, if it's acute, for sure.
I've had friends who were chronic crystal meth users that they became schizophrenic, and then I know people who took psychedelics like mushrooms or acid too much, and then they never came back from that. They never recovered.
Yeah. Any drug, honestly, will mess with your brain if you do too much of it. I mean, our brain is so delicate, and we take our bodies for granted,
Do you think drug treatment centers in the U.S. is any different from other parts of the world?
A lot of people have written me through the years that have found Rewired from the UK, Canada, Costa Rica, like different centers from there have reached out to me. I don't know what they're like. I would love to go, see. There's a lady in the UK that uses Rewired, and I met with her actually for coffee shoes in LA once. And it sounded like it was more mental health stuff than like true addiction, just because I think the stigma of addiction is different in different countries. Like in Ireland, for instance, the rates of alcoholism is through the roof, and there's a lot of sexual abuse and families, and a lot of things aren't talked about. And I've worked with some colleagues from Ireland, and so I think there's different things culturally going on in every country. It's a dream of mine to connect with the people in Europe and in Asia and wherever, who in Mexico, that have centers and places and that are doing the work too. So
it seems like some countries have more of a budget from the government to have treatment centers, recovery centers for people.
Yeah. Well, Canada has an amazing thing going on there, especially in Vancouver. There's places for people to go to have clean needles, and there's a lot of treatment for methadone and a lot of other things going on that they talk about, I think, more freely. Different cities in the US have come up with different things, but it's still right now the biggest crisis. I mean, it's...
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know if this is accurate, but I think there's more jails than treatment centers, right, in the US?
Probably. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would think so.
So ironic. So you have a book, Rewired. Did you say you're working on another book?
No, I Rewired, and Rewired has a workbook, and
Okay.
then I have a book called The Rewired Life, which came out after Rewired. It's kind of for the general public on self care. I have a coloring book, The Rewired coloring book, and I have a book that came out a year ago called 101 Affirmations for Addiction and Recovery, and so it's about affirmations, and there's actually affirmations in them, and I just kind of discuss the power of our thought habits.
Hmm.
And again, like I said to you, when you change your thought habits for the better, your life changes.
So they're cards, affirmation
No, it's a
cards, or
book. It's a book, and
oh, okay,
it has
every day.
different sections on different kinds of affirmations.
And do you do any workshops or any programs
Yes,
or retreats?
yes, I do.
Okay.
I haven't done retreats. I do workshops all the time. I did workshops for Salesforce. I've done workshops, like I said, for different treatment companies. I went through a period in COVID where I did a lot of workshops, corporate workshops for like everyday people on self-care and burnout and resilience and
Okay.
taking care of themselves. So yeah, I love speaking. I love doing that kind of stuff. I'd love to start doing retreats. There's a lot more to come.
So not necessarily just around addiction, but also around taking care of yourself, health and wellness. That's what
Yes,
you do as well.
yes, yes. It's
That's
another
awesome.
passion of mine is to work with the general public on all that. Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Everyone.
If
Yeah.
people want to find you, where can they find you?
They could go to ericaspiegelman.com. It's my
Okay.
website. It has all the information on there. There's some free stuff and also information on, speaking workshops, anything like that on my
Okay.
website.
So your
Yeah.
website, and then you're on social, you're on
I'm
Instagram.
on Instagram at Erica Spiegelman and Facebook. I have a business page. But yeah, mostly on Instagram at Erica Spiegelman. I try and stay connected with people there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Erica, this was great.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for making the time to connect with me, talk about these things. Very interesting, much needed conversation in our society.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully maybe one day I can meet you in person, or maybe you can come by the office and we can do a treatment.
I would love to. It was my honor. I'm so happy that we got the time. Yeah.
Yeah, likewise. All right.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so
I know you're
much.
busy. You got to run back to your family. Have a good rest of your day and
Thank
a
you.
good weekend.
Thank you. Sending you lots of love. Thanks for having me.
Likewise. Bye.
Okay.